Good evening, travelers of time and story. Wherever you are, whatever the hour on the clock beside you, welcome to Mythoria, Secrets and Sagas. I invite you to take a breath, to let the weight of the day fall away, and to enter a world where myth and memory are woven together. Tell me in the comments below what time it is where you are and from which corner of the world you have joined us. For here, we are not bound by borders or hours, only by the stories that survive the ages. Tonight, we begin one of the oldest tales ever told. Older than Homer, older than the Bible, older even than the walls of Athens. It is the story of a king, a city, and the unending search for meaning. It is the Epic of Gilgamesh. Imagine, if you will, the great city of Uruk, standing beneath the burning sun of Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. The land between the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, was the cradle of civilization. Here, the first farmers coaxed wheat and barley from the soil. Here, the first scribes pressed symbols into wet clay, capturing thoughts before they vanished like smoke. And here, behind mighty walls of baked brick, rose Uruk, one of the first true cities in human history. The walls themselves were said to be unmatched. Towering, wide, solid as mountains, they encircled the city like the embrace of a giant. The people would boast, climb upon the walls of Uruk, walk their circuit, and gaze upon the foundations laid by 7 sages long ago. These stones are the work of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal. A king, a tyrant, a builder, and a seeker. The epic begins by praising him, by urging the listener to look upon his achievements. Yet woven into this praise is a darker note. He is not merely great, he is also restless, domineering, and cruel. The people of Uruk cry out beneath the weight of his power. He takes what he desires, wealth, glory, even the daughters of his own subjects. His strength is unrivaled, his ambition endless. And so, the story begins with tension, the paradox of greatness. For what is a king? Is he a protector of his people or a devourer of their freedom? In Gilgamesh, we see both. His divine blood drives him toward the impossible, but his human heart, restless and unsatisfied, leaves him always searching. Pause for a moment and reflect on this. How often do we celebrate greatness without considering the cost? Every towering wall, every shining monument carries the weight of those who labored, who suffered, who bent under its making. In Gilgamesh, we see not only the hero, but also the tyrant. And perhaps we recognize something of ourselves, of the hunger that drives all humans to want more, even when we do not know what we are seeking. In Uruk, the streets were alive with trade. Merchants offered copper from distant mines, lapis lazuli from faraway mountains, cedar wood from the forests of Lebanon. Priests led chants in towering ziggurats, their voices rising like incense toward the heavens. The river carried boats heavy with grain, feeding not only Uruk itself, but also the towns that surrounded it. Civilization, in all its splendor and weight, pulsed within these walls. And at the center stood Gilgamesh. To his people he was a riddle, half-god, yet plagued by human desire, invincible, yet insatiable. He could not rest. He longed for deeds that would make his name echo through eternity. The clay tablets tell us, he who saw the deep, the foundation of the land, who knew the ways of all things, was wise in all matters. Gilgamesh it was who built the walls of Uruk the sheepfold. Think about that. To build is to defy time. To raise walls of brick and stone is to shout against the silence of mortality. I was here. I mattered. Every civilization leaves behind its monuments, the pyramids, the temples, the statues carved from marble, and yet time erodes them all. Even the walls of Uruk, once so mighty, lie now in ruins, half buried by sand. This is where our story begins, in the paradox between immortality and decay. Gilgamesh sought to live forever, and yet what remains of him is not his body, but his story. Perhaps, as we journey together through his epic, we too will ask what endures. Our bones will not, our empires will not, but perhaps our words, our kindness, our love, perhaps those will echo, just as the name of Gilgamesh still echoes now. So settle in. Let your mind drift to those ancient streets, to the hum of life within the walls, to the restless eyes of the king who walked among them. For soon another figure will emerge, a wild man born from the gods' hands, destined to befriend the king and transform his heart. But that is for the next chapter. For now, we stand at the gates of Uruk, watching the sun sink behind its walls, listening to the whispers of history. And we ask ourselves, what walls have we built in our own lives? Are they to protect us or to imprison us? Do they guard us from the chaos of the world, or do they keep us from living fully? The story begins, as all great stories do, with a city, a king, and a question. The story of Gilgamesh cannot be told without his counterpart. For every ruler there is a challenger, for every monument there is a shadow, for every city there is a wilderness. And so the gods, hearing the cries of Uruk's people, chose to shape a being of raw strength, a balance to the restless king. Far from the brick walls, beyond the tilled fields, in the open steppe where gazelles ran free, a figure was born of clay and spirit. His name was Enkidu. He was not born of a mother, nor nurtured by a father. He emerged from the earth itself, shaped by the gods as a wild man covered in hair with the strength of storms in his arms. Enkidu lived among the animals. He ran with the herds, drank from the rivers, tore roots from the soil. The gazelles were his companions, the lions his rivals, the winds his lullaby. To the hunters of the land, he was a terror. He broke their traps, freed the animals, and shattered the balance between man and beast. For Enkidu was nature untamed, the wilderness refusing to bow to civilization. And here lies the great tension of the human story. We are both builders of cities and children of the wild. Part of us longs for walls, for order, for safety. Another part aches for freedom, for forests and open skies. Enkidu is that forgotten half, the half that still runs barefoot across the earth, unchained by laws, untouched by ambition. But the hunters, threatened by this wild protector of beasts, went to Gilgamesh and pleaded, "A man roams the steppe, like us in form, but with strength beyond ours. He destroys our snares, he saves the animals. We cannot prevail against him. O king, send us a woman, and through her he will be subdued." And so Shamat was chosen. She was a woman of the temple, wise in the arts of love and persuasion. The hunters led her to the watering hole, where Enkidu came to drink. And there, beside the river, began a meeting that would change the course of history. When Enkidu beheld her, curiosity stirred within him. She was unlike any gazelle, any lion, any creature of the steppe. She spoke words he did not know, moved with a grace foreign to his world. For 6 days and 7 nights, Enkidu remained with her, learning the ways of human closeness, of warmth, of intimacy. And when at last he rose, ready to return to his animals, they fled from him. The gazelles bolted, the herd scattered. They sensed he had changed. He was no longer fully theirs. His knees weakened, his running slowed. The bond between him and the wild was broken. There is tragedy in this moment. To become human is to lose something. We gain knowledge, love, culture, speech, but we lose the innocence of belonging entirely to the earth. Enkidu, who once drank with the deer, now found the water bitter. The food of beasts no longer satisfied him. He was both more and less than before. Shamat, seeing his confusion, spoke gently. "Come, Enkidu, you are wise now, like a god. Come with me to Uruk, the city of Gilgamesh. There you will find your equal. There you will discover the destiny for which you were made." And so Enkidu followed. Step by step, the wilderness gave way to the path of man. Fields appeared, furrowed and ordered. Shepherds tended flocks. The smoke of hearths rose against the horizon, and beyond it all, the mighty walls of Uruk gleamed in the sun. Enkidu entered the city as an outsider, his eyes wide at the press of crowds, the smell of bread, the clamor of markets. Here was another world, alien to the silence of the steppe, yet within his heart burned the same strength that had once defied hunters and lions. The people whispered, "Perhaps this wild man will stand against our king. Perhaps at last there will be balance." And balance was indeed coming. For Gilgamesh and Enkidu were two halves of one whole. Civilization and wilderness, ambition and innocence, pride and friendship. Their meeting would spark battles, adventures, and a bond deeper than either had imagined. But before they could stand side by side, they would first clash, two forces colliding like storm against storm. The story of Gilgamesh cannot be told without his counterpart. For every ruler there is a challenger, for every monument there is a shadow, for every city there is a wilderness. And so the gods, hearing the cries of Uruk's people, chose to shape a being of raw strength, a balance to the restless king. Far from the brick walls, beyond the tilled fields, in the open steppe where gazelles ran free, a figure was born of clay and spirit. His name was Enkidu. He was not born of a mother, nor nurtured by a father. He emerged from the earth itself, shaped by the gods as a wild man covered in hair with the strength of storms in his arms. Enkidu lived among the animals. He ran with the herds, drank from the rivers, tore roots from the soil. The gazelles were his companions, the lions his rivals, the winds his lullaby. To the hunters of the land, he was a terror. He broke their traps, freed the animals, and shattered the balance between man and beast. For Enkidu was nature untamed, the wilderness refusing to bow to civilization. And here lies the great tension of the human story. We are both builders of cities and children of the wild. Part of us longs for walls, for order, for safety. Another part aches for freedom, for forests and open skies. Enkidu is that forgotten half, the half that still runs barefoot across the earth, unchained by laws, untouched by ambition. But the hunters, threatened by this wild protector of beasts, went to Gilgamesh and pleaded, "A man roams the steppe, like us in form, but with strength beyond ours. He destroys our snares, he saves the animals. We cannot prevail against him. O king, send us a woman, and through her he will be subdued." And so Shamat was chosen. She was a woman of the temple, wise in the arts of love and persuasion. The hunters led her to the watering hole, where Enkidu came to drink. And there, beside the river, began a meeting that would change the course of history. When Enkidu beheld her, curiosity stirred within him. She was unlike any gazelle, any lion, any creature of the steppe. She spoke words he did not know, moved with a grace foreign to his world. For 6 days and 7 nights, Enkidu remained with her, learning the ways of human closeness, of warmth, of intimacy. And when at last he rose, ready to return to his animals, they fled from him. The gazelles bolted, the herd scattered. They sensed he had changed. He was no longer fully theirs. His knees weakened, his running slowed. The bond between him and the wild was broken. There is tragedy in this moment. To become human is to lose something. We gain knowledge, love, culture, speech, but we lose the innocence of belonging entirely to the earth. Enkidu, who once drank with the deer, now found the water bitter. The food of beasts no longer satisfied him. He was both more and less than before. Shamat, seeing his confusion, spoke gently. "Come, Enkidu, you are wise now, like a god. Come with me to Uruk, the city of Gilgamesh. There you will find your equal. There you will discover the destiny for which you were made." And so Enkidu followed. Step by step, the wilderness gave way to the path of man. Fields appeared, furrowed and ordered. Shepherds tended flocks. The smoke of hearths rose against the horizon, and beyond it all, the mighty walls of Uruk gleamed in the sun. Enkidu entered the city as an outsider, his eyes wide at the press of crowds, the smell of bread, the clamor of markets. Here was another world, alien to the silence of the steppe, yet within his heart burned the same strength that had once defied hunters and lions. The people whispered, "Perhaps this wild man will stand against our king. Perhaps at last there will be balance." And balance was indeed coming. For Gilgamesh and Enkidu were two halves of one whole. Civilization and wilderness, ambition and innocence, pride and friendship. Their meeting would spark battles, adventures, and a bond deeper than either had imagined. But before they could stand side by side, they would first clash, two forces colliding like storm against storm. In Uruk, the meeting of Gilgamesh and Enkidu was like thunder echoing across the plain. When they first stood face to face, strength against strength, pride against wildness, the city held its breath. They wrestled, shaking the very foundations of the palace. Dust rose, hearts pounded, and the people whispered, "Who will prevail? Who is the stronger?" Neither fell, neither broke, for though they clashed as enemies, they rose as brothers. Gilgamesh saw in Enkidu a mirror of his own power, a rival who could not be crushed, and therefore a companion he could finally respect. Enkidu, once wild, now found his equal in the restless king. In that clash, friendship was born, and friendship soon demanded adventure. Gilgamesh, insatiable in his hunger for glory, turned his eyes beyond the walls of Uruk. To the west lay the great Cedar Forest, guarded by a fearsome being, Humbaba, the monster of the gods. His face was said to strike terror, his roar like fire, his breath a storm. He was the appointed guardian of Enlil, lord of the earth. The trees he watched over were sacred, forbidden to mortals. But to Gilgamesh, they were a prize. "What is the worth of a man," he asked, "if he does not carve his name upon the world? I will cut down the cedars, I will slay Humbaba, and all generations will know my fame." Enkidu hesitated. He knew the forest. He had wandered in its shadow when he was still a creature of the wild. He knew the power of Humbaba, the fury of Enlil. "This is folly," he warned. "To go is to defy the gods. Humbaba is death itself." Yet Gilgamesh's resolve was unshaken, and here lies a truth about human ambition. It thrives not in reason, but in defiance. What we fear, we often chase. What is forbidden, we long to touch. Enkidu, bound by friendship, yielded. Together they armed themselves, axes of bronze, swords sharp as lightning. The elders of Uruk wept as they departed, blessing their king yet trembling for his fate. The mother of Gilgamesh prayed to Shamash, the sun god, to watch over her son. And then, with the horizon blazing before them, the two companions set forth. The journey was long. They traveled days and nights, dreams mingling with waking visions. In sleep, Gilgamesh was haunted by omens, mountains collapsing, fire raining down, wild bulls charging. Each time Enkidu interpreted, "These are signs of victory. The gods show us the trials we must overcome." Whether truth or comfort, the dreams drove them onward. At last the cedars rose before them, a forest vast and fragrant, trunks stretching toward the heavens, shadows deep as eternity. And in its heart, Humbaba stirred. His roar shook the trees, his eyes blazed with fire, the earth trembled as he advanced. Gilgamesh faltered. Even the mighty king felt the icy grip of fear. His knees weakened, his voice broke. But Enkidu, sensing the terror in his friend, spoke fiercely. "Do not yield now. Strike, for it is better to fall in battle than to live in shame. Remember, we came for glory. Let us seize it." With that, courage surged again. Gilgamesh raised his axe. The two charged as one. Steel clashed against the monstrous strength of Humbaba. The forest roared with the sound of combat. Trees splintered, ground shook, cries echoed like thunder. Yet Humbaba was no mere beast. He fought with the power of storms, his sevenfold radiance blinding them. Again and again they staggered beneath his fury. Only the aid of Shamash, the sun god, turned the tide, sending winds to bind Humbaba, pinning his arms, spreading his legs. At last, Humbaba lay defeated. He pleaded for his life, promising to serve Gilgamesh as his vassal. His voice, once terrible, now trembled with fear. "Spare me," he begged. "I will cut your cedars. I will be your servant. I will guard you all your days." Gilgamesh hesitated. The blade hovered in his hand. Mercy flickered in his heart. But Enkidu, fearing the wrath of the gods if Humbaba lived, urged, "Do not trust him. Strike now, before he rises again. End him." And so Gilgamesh struck. The axe fell. Humbaba's head rolled upon the ground, his terror silenced forever. The forest grew still. They cut down the cedars, shaping the tallest into a mighty gate for the temple of Uruk. The heroes returned victorious, their names now bound together, their fame secured. Yet the gods looked upon this act with anger, for the Cedar Forest was sacred, Humbaba their chosen guardian. The death of the monster was no triumph in heaven's eyes, but an affront. And thus, though Gilgamesh and Enkidu rejoiced, though their names rang with glory in Uruk streets, their fate was already sealed. For when man defies the gods answer not with silence, but with vengeance. Glory echoed through the streets of Uruk. The people rejoiced, singing of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, heroes who had slain Humbaba and brought back the cedar wood for their temples. The city pulsed with celebration, feasts, music, praise rising like smoke to the heavens. And in the midst of this triumph, eyes from above were watching. Among the gods, one goddess in particular turned her gaze upon Gilgamesh. Ishtar, queen of heaven, daughter of Anu, goddess of love and war. Her beauty was radiant, her power undeniable, her desires swift as fire. And when she beheld the king of Uruk, her heart burned with passion. She descended, adorned in splendor, and stood before Gilgamesh. Her voice, both honey and flame, spoke. "Come to me, Gilgamesh, be my lover. I will grant you kingship beyond kingship. I will harness for you the chariot of storm and rainbow, drawn by lions and winged steeds. The nations will bow before you. Riches, glory, and eternity will be yours if you take me into your arms." But Gilgamesh, bold as ever, refused. More than that, he scorned her. With words sharp as blades, he mocked the goddess herself. "Why should I take you, Ishtar? What man has ever loved you and prospered? Your lovers are discarded like broken toys. You loved Tammuz, and he was struck down. You loved the shepherd bird, and you broke his wing. You loved the stallion, and you destined him for whip and harness. You loved the lion, and you dug pits for him. Why should I be any different?" The words cut deeper than any sword. Before the people, before heaven itself, Gilgamesh had humiliated the goddess of love. Ishtar's fury blazed. She ascended to her father Anu, lord of the sky, and cried out, "Father, Gilgamesh has insulted me. Grant me the bull of heaven that I may strike him down. If you refuse, I will shatter the gates of the underworld, release the dead to feast upon the living, and the world shall drown in chaos." Anu trembled at her wrath. Reluctantly, he gave her the bull of heaven, and so, from the sky descended a terror. The bull thundered across the land, its breath a storm, its steps opening cracks in the earth. At its charge, 100 men fell into the abyss. With its snort, rivers of dust and blood filled the streets. Uruk quaked in fear, the people scattered, and Gilgamesh, with Enkidu at his side, stepped forth to face the divine beast. The battle was fierce. The bull charged, horns gleaming like crescent moons. Gilgamesh seized its tail, straining with all his might, while Enkidu leapt upon its back, driving his blade into its neck. Together they wrestled the beast to the ground. Its roar split the heavens, and then fell silent. The bull of heaven was slain. Enkidu, triumphant, tore the thigh from the creature's carcass and hurled it before Ishtar, who watched from the walls of Uruk. "There is your bull," he cried. "As for you, goddess, I would do the same to you if I could." The city erupted in celebration once again, but beneath the cheers, An unease lingered, for in slaying Humbaba they had offended Enlil. In killing the bull they had humiliated Ishtar herself. And the gods, though silent for now, do not forget. In the quiet of night, as the revelry faded, Enkidu dreamed. He saw the council of the gods, gathered in judgment. Enlil, Shamash, Ishtar, Anu, voices raised in anger. Someone must pay for these insults, for the blood of Humbaba, for the death of the bull of heaven. And in his dream, Enkidu heard the decree. One of the two must die. It would not be Gilgamesh. It would be him. When Enkidu awoke, his body trembled. A shadow clung to him, a weight pressing upon his chest. And though he did not yet know the hour, he felt it. His days were numbered. The story of triumph had turned towards sorrow, for the greatest friendships are not measured in their victories, but in the grief that follows their loss. The days after the slaying of the bull of heaven were filled with uneasy silence. Though the streets of Uruk rang with songs, though feasts were laid out in the hero's honor, Gilgamesh and Enkidu could not escape the weight of what had passed. For in their dreams, shadows stirred. Enkidu was the first to be touched. One night, as he lay beside his friend, he saw a vision darker than any battle. The heavens thundered, the earth split wide, and before him rose a creature cloaked in wings of darkness, its face like storm cloud and fire. It seized him by the hair and dragged him down into the underworld. He saw a house of dust, where kings and priests alike served as shadows, where crowns lay in the dirt and the light of the sun never entered. When he awoke, his body trembled, his voice broke. "Brother," he whispered to Gilgamesh, "I dreamed of the land where all go in the end, the house where dust is their food, clay their bread. I saw the kings of old, stripped of glory. I saw the priests, the wise, the mighty, all alike crouching in darkness. And I know now that death is near and it is coming for me." Gilgamesh tried to comfort him, but the truth had already taken root. Enkidu fell ill. His body, once strong as the lion's, grew heavy, weak. Fever burned through him. For 12 days he lay, cursing and lamenting. At first, he cursed the hunter who led him from the wild. He cursed Shamat, who had drawn him into the world of men. "If only I had remained with the gazelles," he cried. "If only I had never tasted bread, never drunk beer, never known the touch of a woman. Then I would be free still, running with the herds. Now I die, and all for nothing." But Shamash, the sun god, rebuked him in a vision. "Do not curse her, Enkidu. Through her you gained wisdom, love, and friendship. You became more than a beast, more than dust. You found Gilgamesh, and together you carved your names into the world. This too is a gift." Enkidu wept. His anger softened. He saw truth in those words. To live is to lose, yet even loss gives meaning to life. Gilgamesh, meanwhile, sat beside him, powerless. He who had conquered monsters, who had slain the bull of heaven, could do nothing against the slow creep of death. He touched his friend's hand, felt its heat, and knew he could not hold him forever. On the 12th day, as dawn broke, Enkidu's breath grew shallow. His eyes, once fierce and bright, dimmed like embers fading in ash. He spoke one last time. "Brother, my dear brother, I must go down to that house where none return. Do not forget me. Do not let my name vanish like smoke. Remember me and live on." Then he was gone. Gilgamesh covered his face with his hands. He tore his hair, ripped his clothes, and roared like a lion wounded in the heart. The city of Uruk mourned, but none as deeply as the king himself. For Gilgamesh had lost not just a companion, but his other half, the wild to his order, the friend who had made him human. Day after day, Gilgamesh wandered in grief. He touched Enkidu's body, refusing to bury it, fearing that if he let go, the bond would truly be broken. He cried to the heavens, "Hear me, you gods who have done this. Is this the fate of man? That love should end in dust, that joy should vanish in shadow? Must even the strongest fall, even the noblest fade?" And here, for the first time, Gilgamesh faced the truth that all men face, that death is not a foe to be slain, nor a wall to be scaled. It is the shadow that waits for all. This moment changed him. The tyrant who once crushed his people now trembled like a child. The hero who had slain Humbaba now feared the silence of the grave. His heart, once filled with ambition, now overflowed with dread. Enkidu Inc.'s death became the seed of Gilgamesh, its greatest journey. A journey not for glory, nor for cedar wood, nor for fame, but for the impossible, eternal life. The story of kings and monsters was over. The story of mortality and meaning had begun. Grief had broken Gilgamesh. He who had stood fearless before monsters, who had laughed in the face of gods, now trembled at the silence of the grave. Day after day he wandered Uruk's streets in despair. He could not eat, could not sleep, could not find solace in his throne or his walls. For Enkidu, his brother, his other half, had gone into the land from which none return. And Gilgamesh for the first time saw himself clearly. He was 2/3 divine, yes, but 1/3 mortal. That mortal part would one day crumble into dust, just as Enkidu had. No power, no fame, no wall of brick would stop it. His voice rose to the heavens. Shall I too not die? Must I lie in the dust like him? Is there no escape, no way to live forever? And so, with a heart full of sorrow and defiance, Gilgamesh abandoned Uruk. He left his throne, his city, his people, and set out into the wilderness. He would seek the one man said to have cheated death, Utnapishtim, survivor of the great flood, who had been granted eternal life by the gods. The road was long and terrible. Gilgamesh wandered through deserts, where the wind scoured the bones of the dead. He wrapped himself in animal skins, his hair unkempt, his face hollow. No longer did he resemble a king. He was a wanderer, a shadow, a man possessed by fear. On his path, he encountered lions in the night. Once, he would have hunted them for sport. Now, in his loneliness, he embraced them, wept among them, until finally he slew them and clothed himself in their hides, as if to take their strength into his own. At last, he reached the twin mountains of Mashu, whose peaks touched the heavens, whose roots reached the underworld. At their gates stood scorpion men, guardians, with bodies half human, half beast, eyes blazing with fire. Their glance alone could strike death into mortals. When Gilgamesh approached, they raised their weapons, but seeing his sorrow, they pitied him. What drives you here, King of Uruk? Few men dare cross these gates. Gilgamesh answered, I seek Utnapishtim, who dwells beyond the waters of death. I will not rest until I find the secret of eternal life. The scorpion men warned him, the path you seek is shrouded in darkness, 12 leagues of night where no light shines. No mortal has crossed it and lived. But Gilgamesh pressed on. Through the black tunnel he went, groping in endless dark. For leagues upon leagues he stumbled, no dawn, no stars, no breath of wind. His heart thundered like a drum, yet still he moved forward, until at last a faint glow appeared. Step by step, light grew. Then suddenly he emerged into a garden unlike any on earth. Trees bore jewels instead of fruit. Branches glittered with lapis, with carnelian, with emeralds. The ground shimmered with stones more radiant than dew. It was a vision of paradise, beauty eternal, yet lifeless, untouchable. There, Gilgamesh met Siduri, a wise woman, keeper of a tavern at the edge of the world. She looked upon his ragged form and pitied him. Why do you wander, Gilgamesh, in such sorrow? Why seek what cannot be found? And she spoke words, still echoing through the ages. Life you seek, you will not find. When the gods created man, they kept life in their own hands. You, Gilgamesh, fill your belly with good things. Day and night, dance and be merry. Cherish the child who holds your hand. Delight in your wife's embrace, for these are the lot of man. But Gilgamesh, consumed by fear, refused her counsel. "Until I have spoken to Utnapishtim, I cannot rest. Show me the way." And so she directed him to Urshanabi, the ferryman, who alone could cross the waters of death. With him, Gilgamesh set sail upon a boat, poles in hand, pushing through the black waters where no life stirred, no wind blew, no wave broke. The journey was endless, the silence suffocating. But beyond those waters lay the one man who knew the truth, Utnapishtim, who had survived when the world drowned, who alone had received immortality. Gilgamesh's heart pounded with hope and terror, for ahead lay either salvation or despair. The boat glided silently across the waters of death. No fish stirred, no breeze touched the sail, no bird called in the air. Only Gilgamesh and Urshanabi, the ferryman, moved forward, their poles pushing through the stillness. Behind him lay Uruk, the Cedar Forest, Humbaba, Enkidu. Ahead lay the unknown. At last, on the far shore, a dwelling appeared. There stood Utnapishtim, the faraway man, who alone among mortals had been granted eternal life. His face was weathered like ancient stone, yet his eyes carried the calm of one who has seen beyond death. Gilgamesh stumbled onto the shore, ragged, desperate. He fell to his knees and cried out, "Tell me, Utnapishtim, how can I escape the fate of all men? How did you, alone among mortals, find everlasting life? Show me the secret, for I cannot bear the silence of the grave." Utnapishtim looked at him with sorrow. "Why do you grieve so, Gilgamesh? No man may escape death. The gods gave life, and they kept eternal life for themselves. You chase shadows across the desert, yet since you have come so far, I will tell you my story." And so Utnapishtim spoke of the days when the world was young. The gods once decided to destroy mankind. Their hearts were set against us, though the reason is long forgotten. Enlil decreed the flood to sweep away all life. But Ea, the wise god, whispered to me in a dream. He told me to tear down my house and build a great boat. "Leave possessions behind," he said. "Take only seed of life. Build it wide, build it tall, roof it as the heavens. Into it bring every creature, 2 of each, and your family with you. When the flood comes, you will survive." I obeyed. I built the ark as he commanded, sealing it with pitch, filling it with all living things. The storm came, black clouds, thunder, lightning. For 6 days and 7 nights the winds raged. The waters swallowed mountains, tore cities from their foundations. Mankind perished, swept away like reeds. On the 7th day, silence. The sea lay flat as glass. My boat lodged upon the mountain of Nisia. I released a dove. It flew and returned. I released a swallow. It too returned. Then I released a raven, and it did not return. It had found dry land, and so I opened the boat. I made an offering to the gods, and the sweet smell rose into the heavens. The gods gathered like flies over the sacrifice. Enlil was furious that any man had survived, but Ea rebuked him. "Lay not your wrath on the innocent, punish only the guilty, spare mankind, for without them who will worship you?" And so, moved by Ea's wisdom, the gods relented. They granted me and my wife eternal life, setting us here at the mouth of the rivers, far from men. Thus I live, though all others die. Gilgamesh listened, his heart pounding. The story was both hope and despair. If Utnapishtim had found eternal life, perhaps he too could. Yet when he begged to be told the secret, Utnapishtim shook his head. "There is no secret, Gilgamesh. No trick, no road. Life and death are woven together. The gods have fixed it so that man's days are numbered. Even you, great king, must accept it." But Gilgamesh, stubborn and desperate, would not yield. "Test me," he demanded. "If I cannot conquer death, at least let me prove my strength against sleep, its brother." Utnapishtim agreed. "Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. If you can master sleep, perhaps you can master death." Gilgamesh sat, eyes wide, heart resolved. But exhaustion claimed him. Even as he swore to resist, his lids grew heavy. Within moments he sank into deep slumber. Utnapishtim's wife baked a loaf of bread each day, placing it beside him as proof of time passing. When Gilgamesh awoke, he saw the loaves, stale, moldy, hard as stone, and knew he had failed. The truth struck him like a spear. If he could not master sleep, how could he hope to master death? Yet Utnapishtim, moved by pity, offered one last chance. At the bottom of the sea lies a plant that restores youth. Take it if you have the strength, and you may at least taste life renewed. Hope flared once more in Gilgamesh's chest. He tied stones to his feet, plunged into the dark waters, and seized the plant. Rising to the surface, gasping for air, he held it aloft, the plant of life. At last, he believed his quest was fulfilled. But fate was not done with him. Gilgamesh held the plant in his hands, dripping with salt water, its thorns sharp yet fragrant with the promise of renewal. His heart soared. At last, after all the deserts, the darkness, the grief, he had found what he sought. The plant was said to restore youth to the old, to make the weary strong again. Though it was not eternal life, it was a taste of it, a chance to begin anew. Gilgamesh thought of Uruk, of his people, of his throne. He imagined sharing it with the elders, giving them back their strength. Perhaps, he thought, if he could bring renewal to others, his own name would never fade. He turned to Urshanabi, the ferryman. This plant I will take to Uruk. There I will test it on the old, and if it works, I too shall eat of it. Then my youth will return, and my reign will last longer than the stars. With joy in his heart, he began the long journey home. Days passed, his spirit lighter than it had been since the death of Enkidu. At last, he believed he had conquered fate. But fate is cunning, and nature has its own designs. One evening, weary from travel, Gilgamesh stopped by a cool spring. The water shimmered, inviting. He set down the plant, stripped off his lion skin, and bathed. The chill refreshed him, the grief of his journey washed from his body. For a moment, he felt at peace, and then, from the depths, a serpent stirred. Drawn by the scent of the plant, it slithered forth. Silent, swift, it seized the treasure and devoured it whole. In an instant, the promise of renewal was gone. When Gilgamesh turned, he saw only the trail of the serpent disappearing into the desert. Its skin gleamed as it shed the old for the new, glistening with the gift of the plant. The king fell to his knees. His hands clutched the earth. His voice broke in anguish. For whom have I labored? For whom have I traveled these deserts, braved the waters, borne the grief of Enkidu? The serpent has taken my prize, and I have nothing. Here, the cruel irony revealed itself. The plant had indeed brought life, but not to him. To the serpent it gave renewal, as snakes shed their skin and are born anew. Gilgamesh, meanwhile, remained a man, mortal, wounded, destined to die. Yet in that moment of despair, a truth stirred. He realized that even if he had eaten the plant, even if his youth returned, death would still come one day. Nothing could halt the flow of time. Not truly. And so, broken but wiser, he gathered himself and continued his journey back to Uruk. He carried no plant, no secret of immortality, only the weight of all he had seen, all he had lost, and all he had learned. The road back was long, but Gilgamesh no longer rushed. His steps, though heavy, were steady. The desert stretched wide, the rivers wound through the land, and all the while his thoughts circled the same truth. He was mortal. He had crossed mountains and darkness. He had slain monsters, defied gods, sought eternal life at the edge of the world. And still, like all men, he would one day fall into dust. The serpent had stolen the plant, yes, but in truth it had only revealed what was inevitable. At last, the walls of Uruk rose before him, towering, immense, shining in the sun, just as they had when he first set out. His city, his people, his throne, all waiting. But Gilgamesh was no longer the same king who had left. He stood upon the walls, looking out across the land. Farmers worked their fields, children played in the streets, merchants shouted their wares in the markets. Life continued, fragile yet unbroken. And there, gazing upon the city he had built, Gilgamesh understood. Immortality was not in plants, nor in hidden men, nor in divine bargains. It was here, in the stones of the walls, in the hands of the people, in the stories they would tell. The tablets of clay spoke. Look at the walls of Uruk, inspect the foundation terrace, examine the brickwork. Was it not built by Gilgamesh, the king? This was his answer. Death would claim his body as it had claimed Enkidu. But his name, his deeds, his story, those would endure. For as long as men built cities, as long as they told tales by firelight, Gilgamesh would live on. And so, for the first time since Enkidu's death, he found peace. Not the peace of immortality, but the peace of acceptance. He returned to his palace, to his people, not as a tyrant, nor as a hero chasing glory, but as a man who had faced the abyss and learned what it means to be human. And so the tale of Gilgamesh comes full circle, from the glory of Uruk's walls, through the friendship of Enkidu, the battles with Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven, the grief of death, the long journey through deserts and darkness, to the wisdom learned at last upon his return. It is not merely the story of a king, it is the story of us all. What is it we seek in this life? We build, we love, we fight, we fear, we wrestle with death in our dreams, we chase after secrets, we run from shadows. Gilgamesh, though crowned and mighty, was no different from you or me. Beneath his divine blood beat a human heart, fragile, yearning, afraid. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest recorded story in human history. Written in cuneiform on clay tablets, buried for thousands of years, forgotten, then rediscovered by archaeologists in the 19th century. And yet, despite the gulf of centuries, the questions it asks are still ours. Why do we die? What gives life meaning? How do we face the loss of those we love? How do we make peace with our own ending? Enkidu's death shows us the raw wound of loss. Gilgamesh's journey shows us the torment of denial, the frantic flight from mortality. But his return to Uruk shows us acceptance. He could not escape death, but he could build something that would last. Not in his flesh, not in his years, but in memory, in story, in legacy. The walls of Uruk may crumble, but the name of Gilgamesh still lives. 5,000 years later, carried not by stone, but by story. This is the paradox. Death silences the body, but stories make us eternal. And perhaps that is the secret the gods kept from him, and from us. That eternity was never in plants or hidden islands. It was always in the telling, in the remembering, in the love passed from one to another. Immortality is not to live forever. It is to be remembered. Think of your own life, the people you love, the things you create, the kindness you give. These are your walls of Uruk. They may seem small, fragile, fleeting, but they ripple outward, across years, across generations. They carry your name long after you are gone. And so Gilgamesh's story, though drenched in grief, ends not in despair, but in hope. He did not conquer death, but he discovered life. He learned that to be human is not to defy the gods, but to live fully in the days we are given, and to leave behind something worthy of remembrance. As we close this journey together, I invite you, dear listener, to pause for a moment. Look at your own walls, not of stone, but of memory and meaning. What will endure when your days are done? Perhaps as you sit here, it is night. Perhaps the world outside your window is quiet and you feel the weight of time, or perhaps it is morning, the sun rising, the air full of promise. Whatever the hour, wherever you are, know that you are part of this great chain of story, stretching from Gilgamesh to now and beyond. And as we end, I would love to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, Where are you listening from, and what time is it as you hear these words? More than that, share your reflections. What does immortality mean to you? Is it memory? Is it love? Is it the stories we leave behind? Your thoughts are part of this story now, part of Mythoria, secrets and sagas. And in that sharing, perhaps we all become a little more eternal. Thank you for traveling this ancient path with me tonight. Rest well, live deeply, and remember, though our days are numbered, the echoes of our lives may last forever. Good night, travelers. Until the next saga.